We're going to be looking at From a Seed to Plant by Gail Gibbons again today. But this time we're going to read it with a different purpose. We're going to focus on the parts of the plant and the jobs those parts have and how they are important to the plant. All seeds grow into the same kind of plant that made them. So, boys and girls, do you think you could grow an oak tree with a sunflower seed? You're right. No, that would not be possible. So it has to be the same type of plant seed. There are lots of different flowers and different types of seeds. A flower is made up of different parts, and the flower itself is a very special part because the flower contains the seeds, and the seeds is what we need in order to grow a new plant. But let's look at how that happens. At the bottom of the pistil are tiny egg cells, and those egg cells need pollen to make a seed. So here is the stigma, and that stigma is very sticky, and it has a long pistil here. See that tube? When the insect brings the pollen, the little yellow stuff here, from another same type plant, that pollen gets on the stigma that's sticky, and then it grows down to the bottom, and that is what makes a seed. And here we have lots of stamens, and those stamens contain lots of pollen, don't they? And the flower also has beautiful petals. But the main part is the flower, and that's what I want you to remember today. The flower is important because it produces the seeds that are necessary for new plants. Here we have the pollen again that we mentioned, remember? The pollen is very important because without the pollen getting on that stigma, we would not have seeds. That is what makes it possible to have a seed to grow a new plant. You have to have the pollen, and it has to dig its hole down to the ovules, and that's what makes a seed. So pollen is extremely important, and that pollen belongs to an adult plant. An adult plant is one that has a full flower bloomed, where the pollen has gotten to the stigma, and it goes down the long pistil to the bottom where the egg ovules are and forms the seed. So an adult plant, that is where pollination occurs. So that is a really cool word I want us to think about today. Pollination. And do you hear that shun at the end? I want to talk about that for just a little bit. That T-I-O-N says shun. So that looks like a really big word. But really, it's just pollinate and then shun. So if you remember the T-I-O-N says shun, that makes that word much easier to read. And that is a fun word to say. Pollination. It has 4 syllables. And just remember, pollination occurs with the adult plant. And there you can see the pollen flying through the air, the wind. There's a little breeze, and that pollen goes from one plant to the other. And notice they are similar plants there. So this flower is pollinating this flower, and this one is probably pollinating that flower. Pollination happens in different ways. Often the wind blows the pollen from flower to flower, which is what we see here. Another way is for insects and bees to get pollen on their bodies and take to other plants. And we talked about that before, didn't we? So pollen is very important for pollination in the adult plant. And here's where it shows when the pollen gets on that stigma. A little pollen grain from the flower lands there. It grows a long tube. See that? That long tube all the way down to the little ovules. Think about ovules as little baby seeds waiting to happen. And when that little baby seed waiting to happen gets that pollen grain, poof, you have a seed about to begin to grow in that flower. After your flower, your pollinated flower kind of dies, if you notice these leaves here are getting all wilty and the flower is not as beautiful as it once was. But what is it leaving behind? Do you see that? This one here is called a pod. And this is called fruit. That could very well be like an apple or an orange, but this is the flower's fruit. And this is not a fruit that we would eat, but that is what it's called, what is left behind on a flower. And sometimes flowers end up growing a pod, like you see here, like that bean pod. So the fruit or pod, they have a very important job, and that job is to protect the seed. When it ripens and breaks open, guess what happens to their seeds? Hopefully, you're right. Hopefully, they find soil. So, why is a seed so important? Yes, because it is the beginning of a plant. And that beginning is curled up inside each seed. The root. How does the root help the plant, do you think? Yeah, it's in the ground. So how does it help the plant? You're right. The root takes in water and minerals from the soil for food. What about the stem? Think about that. Look at the picture. How does the stem help the plant? You know, I heard you say that. It is true. The stem is what holds the plant up. That is very important. It keeps it from flopping over. Holds it nice and tall so its leaves can reach toward the sun. What else? What's another reason? What's another important job for that stem? Do you remember what the roots do? Well, the roots soak up that water and nutrients from the soil. And the stem allows that water and nutrients to travel up to other parts of the plant. The leaves, what do the leaves do? What's their important job, you think? Let's read our text. The plant grows bigger and bigger. The leaves make food for the plant from the water and minerals in the soil, the sunlight, and the air all around the plant. So the leaves make food for the plant. What do buds do? What are buds? Well, buds are a part of the plant. Why are they important to the plant? Let's read the text. Buds on the plant open into flowers where new seeds will grow. So without buds, we would not have flowers, would we? Because it's the beginning of the flower.